And welcome to 100 Huntley Street. We're so thankful that you could join us on this very special Good Friday. We have a show filled with hope and inspiration.
We certainly do. We've got beautiful music for you. We also have such an inspiring testimony guest.
Yes.
We're really thrilled about
You know,
this story.
I was just kind of hearing her story a little bit as you guys were talking beforehand. And today is all about Good Friday. We're talking about the power of the cross to be able to transform someone's life. And she is a living testimony of that. So I know it's going to be an encouragement. Make sure you stay with us for that. And, this is Good Friday. This is the day that changed everything. This is the day that Jesus went to the cross. But if we're honest, at first glance, it doesn't seem like good.
Yeah.
Right? Because it seems like loss and because it looks like suffering. And it actually looks like it's the end because he's hanging on the cross.
Yeah, and it really does, because when you look at the events of this day, it's so heavy.
Yeah.
Jesus is betrayed, arrested, beaten, mocked, and ultimately nailed to a cross. And, to think the one who healed the sick, the one who raised the dead, the one who brought hope to so many is now hanging there in silence because of the sins of the world.
Yeah, and yet, and this is important, it's not a tragedy. It's a turning point. Right? Because what looked like defeat, this was actually, I love this, it's victory in motion. Jesus knew exactly what was coming, and yet he chose it anyway. He didn't run from the cross. He moved towards it. In Hebrews 12:2, it says that with the joy set before him, knowing that it was going to reconcile us, he went to the cross anyways. And that's why it's a Good Friday, because of what he did.
And Isaiah 53 says that he was pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. And this wasn't random. This wasn't out of control,
Right.
even though it looked out of control.
Yeah.
This was all part of God's plan, not because God had to, but because God loves us so much.
Yeah, every nail, every wound, every moment of suffering, it was all for us. And again, that's what makes it a Good Friday. Because on the cross, sin was dealt with, shame was broken, and the price was paid. And that is the gospel in a nutshell. That's why it's great news.
That's right. And Jesus didn't just die. He gave himself so that we wouldn't have to carry whatever we weren't meant to carry, whatever we had experienced. And today, we don't rush past this moment.
Yeah.
We pause, we reflect, and we remember.
Yeah, because the cross isn't just part of the story.
It is the center of the story.
Right, and we know that you are going to be filled with hope today and you're going to be inspired. So friends, stay with us.
Becky VandenBurg is a newlywed, a woman of deep faith, and someone who walks closely supporting people and families facing addiction. She carries strength, she carries compassion, she carries hope. But that's not where her story began, because in 2017, almost a decade ago, Becky hit rock bottom. And what God has done since then in her life is a story of rescue, restoration, and true freedom. Becky, welcome to 100 Huntley Street.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Well, Becky, we are so honored to have this conversation with you. And we work together here at Crossroads and Yes TV. You're part of the team here. I think something that everyone notices when they encounter you is you have this quiet confidence and strength. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it just comes from the work that the Lord has done in my life. I have journeyed some very deep waters, and now almost anything that comes after that is like, oh, God got me through that, so he can get me through this. This is a walk in the park compared to that.
And Becky, you've got a very specific life verse. I'm sure you have more than one, but one is Colossians 1:13-14. Tell us about that Bible verse and what it means to you.
Yeah, Colossians 1:13 and 14. He has rescued me from the dominion of darkness and placed me in the kingdom of light, in the kingdom of his Son, whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. It just so outlines my life. I was living in the kingdom of darkness 100%, and I was dead in my sin, and God plucked me out and placed me in a new kingdom, in the kingdom of his Son. And it's such a stark difference from before and after that once I found that verse, I was like, wow, the Bible really was written to other people for us, because I just relate to that so strongly.
And Becky, I do know your story, and I think our viewers right now are saying, they want to know your story. Now, Becky, a lot of the story where you started to fall into depths of despair and darkness, it's connected to what happened when you were 8 years old. And what would be a significant trauma that unfolded in your family? What was going on then?
Yeah, so I was born in England. I had 4 siblings, 2 loving parents. My dad was a pastor in England, and the group of churches that he was pastoring at asked if they would be willing to move to Canada, pastor in Canada. So they moved us all there. I was 8 years old, and the church that we moved to was in a lot of pain. They had experienced a lot of trauma, and it was a very, very difficult pastoral season for my parents. It required a lot of them emotionally, spiritually, and it just left us children really entering into this difficult situation as well with them, because we did it as a family. And after several years, my father ended up getting seriously mentally ill, and that left a very large hole in our family. He was gone in all sense of the words. He just slept all day. He wasn't able to do anything, and it was so painful as an 11-year-old when that was going on. It's really the time that I needed my dad to be there for me and to be close to me. And yeah, him being ill obviously wasn't his own fault, but it did affect me and my family very much so.
Yeah, and those are such significant formative years.
Yes.
For a young child, 11 years old. It is when you need the voice of your father to be steady, or a parent. And, Becky, you'd experienced a lot already between 8 and 11. A church community that was reeling through pain and suffering. You're in a new country. You're in Niagara Falls, Ontario, in Canada. And there's all these layers. You watch your dad, who's been a faithful pastor, suddenly fall into serious, significant mental illness. Did you have questions towards God? Were you angry about the way it looked like your family was unraveling?
Yeah, I think it was so difficult, because I wasn't just losing my dad, I was losing my pastor, who at that time was my closest connection to God. I only knew God the Father, what God was like, through my relationship with my dad. So when my dad disappeared from my life, in all intents and purposes, it felt like God had disappeared, and I was so angry and so hurt. And I was like, well, if this is what God is like, no thank you, like, I'm good. And I ended up leaving the church, not wanting anything to do with it. It wasn't because my dad was so ill, it wasn't the church that I wanted to be at anyway, so it just really caused me to step away there.
And that significant pain you'd experienced as a child, you began to try to cope in different ways, right? And we can do things like self-medicate or develop unhealthy relationships. What did that season of coping look like for you? What did you fall into? What did that journey look like?
Yeah, as a teenager, once I had walked away from the Lord, I decided that He was not to be trusted. He was too painful. I started to find other ways to soothe my pain. And it started out small in relationships and in drinking and smoking, and eventually ramped up as what happens in addiction is when you're self-medicating, you have to go to the next step and the next step if you're not dealing with the underlying root cause of what's going on. So by the time I graduated high school and was going off to university, I was using hard drugs. I was engaging in really unsafe behaviors, just trying to heal what really I needed God to heal inside me.
And Becky, at that stage, were you starting to fall in with the wrong crowd? What did that look like in your life?
Yeah, I started high school with a group of friends that loved Jesus, actually. I was very connected to them. And as I started to make different choices and wanted to feel better right away, I did end up going to a different friend group, people who wouldn't judge the choices that I was making, people who were making the similar choices. And it's surprising how quickly you can justify the behaviors when everyone around you is also making the same choices. It just is like, well, this is what everyone is doing, so it's okay that I'm doing this too.
Mm-hmm. And when would you say you realized you were in trouble? Like this, sometimes when we're struggling with addiction or those kinds of issues, there's usually this moment where we say, uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, I would say the first real time that I woke up and said, wow, I think I have a problem was I woke up on Christmas Day in, I think, 2016. And I woke up and I did cocaine right away in the morning, and I couldn't spend any of the day with my family, with my boyfriend's family at the time, because we were just so high all day and we just wanted to do our own thing. And I was like, wow, like this is the most important day of the year for families, and I can't even be present because I didn't want them to see me like that. And I realized at that moment, I was like, I think I have a problem and I might need some help.
And were you considering turning to God in any way at that point?
No, not at all. At that point, I was still very angry with the Lord, didn't want anything to do with him. I still very much blamed him. And because I blamed him for the pain that caused me down this road, I eventually started blaming him for me being in addiction as well. So it just became like everything that was wrong in my life from when I turned 11 to now, it was all God's fault. I didn't really want anything to do with him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so you start to realize that you're at a breaking point. You have a significant issue happening with addiction. And do you reach out? What did you do? What was your next step?
I didn't do anything for a few months because I wanted to try and fix it by myself. So I bartered with myself and with the Lord, as addicts often do before they reach help, of, oh, I'll only do it a few times a week, or I'll only do this much. And that really doesn't work when you're really in the depth of addiction. So I didn't actually end up reaching out until later the following year. And what came with the catalyst for me doing that was actually fear from my younger brother. My parents were going away for the weekend. He was going to throw a party, and I was so scared for him because I remember feeling that is how I started. And I was just like, he cannot go down this road. I love him so much. Like, I will not allow him to end up where I am now. And that was the catalyst that took me to my mom and said, Mom, I have a problem. I need help. I can't do it by myself, and I'm scared for my little brother who might also be going down this path.
I think that's a good question. Like, that's a good point you're making here. I think a lot of people, they start with, substances, and one day they realize, like, I am literally in this pit. I can't get out of it. I'm enslaved to this substance. Mm-hmm. Could you have ever imagined you would end up there in such a state of enslavement to substances?
Yeah, no, I never would have imagined that. I think a lie that the enemy tells us when we're in addiction is you are still in control. You can stop whenever you want to. You are making these choices. And in a lot of ways, you are making those choices. But the nature of any addiction is that it pulls you in further and further to the point where you turn around and look back and you realize you've walked 10 miles into this dark forest and you can't find the way out by yourself.
Oh, Becky. And I think about how you reached out to your mom because then you knew I can't find the way out by myself. Mm-hmm. So what was your mom's response to you when you confessed to her, I'm struggling with addiction? Mm-hmm. What did she say?
She was amazing. I don't remember exactly what she said, but I remember thinking, okay, my mom knows she's going to help me. And she did help me. She's a very powerful lady, just like me. And she immediately started looking into rehab centers. At that point, I didn't want anything to do with the Lord still. I said, no, thank you to nothing Christian. So she started to look at Ontario-based rehabilitation centers, and she found one for me to go to. It was going to have a waiting spot for me in October. And it really, she pushed me through the doors of rehab.
Your family is phenomenal, and your mom sounds like such an incredible woman. So in that season of waiting to go into rehab, what was that like for you? Did you slow things down? Were you saying, okay, I'm going to be going into rehab in 3 months? What was that like?
I think I've come to believe that the time between when an addict says, I need help, and actually gets booked into the rehabilitation or whatever program it is, that is the most dangerous part in an addict's life. We see an end point. We see an end goal where we're not going to have access to these substances, to these behaviors anymore. So it's really like you've got to make every day count for that. And it was terrifying. That was very much the worst time in my life. I couldn't hold down a job, but I was still using drugs every single day. So I started making choices to get access to these drugs that when I look back, I think, thank you, Jesus, that you kept me alive to get to rehab. And I just remember my mom telling me afterwards, she told me that she had to come to the peace with the fact that I might not make it because I was just so dangerous and making such reckless decisions. But God really protected me in those 3 months. When I look back, I was like, wow, like he had me, even though I didn't want anything to do with him. He really protected me to get to that point.
That's a very important word of warning for anyone watching right now who is waiting to go into a rehab facility, that this could be the most dangerous season if you start to, go intensely with your addiction because okay, I'm going to be sobering up forever, hopefully, right, soon enough. Now, Becky, once you entered rehab, that facility, you ended up opening up the Bible. Well, tell us about what made you choose to open up the Bible and how God spoke to you through that.
Oh, God is so good, because I can be a very selfish person, a very self-serving person. And so when I went to this non-Christian rehab, I wanted people to think that I loved the Lord. I had grown up in a Christian home. I was a pastor's kid. I could say all the right things, but in my heart, I didn't want anything to do with God. But I wanted people to think that I wanted something to do with God. So I read my Bible in the open space of the rehab. And actually what happened during that time is I started reading the Psalms, and I was like, oh my goodness, like David feels the way that I felt. Like God is close to the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. I think so often what I had heard from Christians reading the word before that was almost like a bumper sticker over the pain. But then when I was getting into the Psalms, I was like, oh, there is a depth of pain that David walks through, that he describes in these Psalms, that is so similar to what I'm experiencing.
And it's interesting because that stay in rehab didn't work out for you, but another rehab stay did. Tell us about where you ended up in the United States and how God started to move through your life during that experience.
Yeah, so I ended up getting asked to leave this rehab for just decisions that I was making. And after that time, I was sitting in a homeless shelter, and I had my drug dealer who was offering to come and pick me up, and my parents that were offering to come and pick me up. And it was very much, it was like a crossroads of two decisions that I could make. And one of my parents' stipulations for coming to get me was, you have to stay at another rehab facility and it has to be longer than 30 days, because I think the longer that you're in that facility, the better work that it does. So I ended up, by the grace of God, agreeing to my parents' stipulations, and they found this place called His Mansion, which is a recovery community in New Hampshire in the States, completely free. It's a self-sustaining community, so you work there. And when I got there, I just realized that, wow, I really do need the Lord to heal. So I thought, well, maybe God got me into this mess, so perhaps God can get me out of it.
Becky, that's incredible. And this journey of healing, it wasn't overnight, but it took time. How has God reshaped your view of yourself, your world, everything?
When I first got to His Mansion, I was really waiting for God to dramatically come in and rescue me. But what I realized was actually the God's love that I needed was one that was steady and faithful and slow. So my healing with the Lord at His Mansion was one of Him just showing up every day. Every question that I had, He answered. Every fear that I had, He soothed, and He healed the wounds in my heart that I thought would never be healed. So now I get to live in that freedom. He really has taken out the old heart and put a new heart in me. And I just get to live in that every day, and it's really because of God's faithful love.
Becky, for the person watching right now who's struggling with addiction, maybe they're in a dark valley, what would you say to them?
I would say that I tried 15 different ways to get out of addiction by myself, and God came in with His 16th way. You are not too far gone. I thought that I was never going to experience freedom, but God comes in with His will and His purposes, and He loves you more than you could ever know, and He wants you to experience freedom today.
Well, Becky, I'm so thankful for how you've shared your story today. So thankful for what God has done in your life, that we get to serve here at Crossroads and Yes TV together.
Yeah.
And for all the work you do with families experiencing addiction. Becky, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, today is Good Friday, and it's the day we remember that Jesus went to the cross, not just for the world, but for us, for you, for your pain and your past. If there are places in your life that feel too broken, let Becky's story remind you that there is nothing beyond the hope of Jesus. There's nothing that God can't fix. And if you've never made a decision for Jesus, today is a good day to do that, to follow Jesus. Just say, Jesus, I need you. Forgive me. Lead my life. Stay with us. So much more to come.
As we come to the final part of our Holy Week journey, we arrive at a truth that Jesus made unmistakably clear in his final days, and it's this: what it really means to follow him when it costs something. Because following Jesus, it's never been about convenience and it's never been about comfort. It's always been about surrender. In Luke 9:23, Jesus says, "Whoever wants to be my disciple, he must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." And that's not just symbolic language. It's a call to a different kind of life. A life where Jesus isn't just part of your story, he's at the center of it. And as the cross drew closer, Jesus didn't soften that message. In fact, he actually made it clearer. He told his disciples in Matthew 16:25 that whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever wants to lose their life for me will find it. In other words, the life you're trying to hold on to, that could be the very thing that's holding you back from the life that God has for you. Because real discipleship, it costs something. It costs comfort, it costs control, it costs the right way to say, not my way. And we need to see this lived out so powerfully, and we see it lived out powerfully in the final hours of Jesus before the cross. You know, in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is under such immense pressure. He knows exactly what's coming, and yet he prays in Luke 22:42. He says, "Not my will, but yours be done." And that is the picture of true surrender. And that's what it means to follow when it costs something. It's saying yes to God even when it's hard, even when it's unclear, and even when it requires you to lay something down. And if we're honest, this is where the tension is for a lot of us, because we want the benefits of following Jesus without the cost of actually surrendering to him. We want peace, but we don't want the sacrifice, right? We want the purpose, but not obedience. And sometimes we want salvation, but not submission. But Jesus never separated the two. He invites us into a life that is full, but it's also costly. And here's the paradox. When you surrender your life, you don't lose it, friends. You find it. You find freedom, you find purpose, you find a depth of relationship with God that you could never experience otherwise. So today, let me ask you, what is it costing you right now to follow Jesus? Or maybe the better question is, what is he asking you and I to lay down? Is it control? Is it comfort? Is it a relationship, a habit? We just heard about that. A direction that maybe you've been holding on to? Because the invitation of Jesus isn't just to believe in him. It's to follow him fully, completely, and without reservation. And so as we look to the cross this week, we're reminded that Jesus didn't hold anything back. He gave everything, and he calls us to do the same. So let this anchor our hearts today in Luke 14:27. Whoever does not carry their cross and follow me can't be my disciple. I know they're strong words, but they're honest ones. Because following Jesus, it will cost you something. But hear this promise in Mark. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet lose their soul? Because in the end, when you choose Jesus over everything else, you don't lose friends. You gain what matters most, and it will be worth everything. And now it's time for some special in-studio music.
It looked like defeat on Mount Calvary when Jesus died on that tree. His story was doomed in that stone-cold tomb, and darkness thought he was through. But on day 3, Jesus breathed and walked out of the grave in victory. inside that lamb. Death couldn't hold the great I am. On this truth, my faith's gonna stand. God hid a lion inside that lamb. Those chains from the curse have been broken, and graveyards bow before him. The powers of hell are so weak that they fail, but heaven has hope to tell. 'Cause on day 3, Jesus breathed and walked out of the grave in victory. God hid a lion inside that lamb. Death couldn't hold the great I am. On this truth, my faith's gonna stand. God hid a lion inside that lamb. The Lion of Judah, the Lamb that was slain. The Pride of Zion was risen to reign. God hid a lion inside that lamb. Death couldn't hold the great I am. On this truth, my faith's gonna stand. God hid a lion inside that lamb. Inside of that lamb.
Joe, what a special conclusion to your Holy Week Bible teachings all week. You know, reminding us that there's a cost to following Jesus, but at the heart of that is that Jesus paid the ultimate price.
You know, he did. And what a powerful testimony, your conversation today. And just hearing, you know, this young woman who thought that maybe she would never be able to have her life changed, but when she surrendered, again, we were talking about surrendering your life and coming to that realization that God can change your life totally and completely. You know, as we close off this week of following Jesus to the cross, I can't help but think of, you know, that centurion. The Bible says in Matthew 27:54 that when the centurion and those that were with him guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified, but they exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." And I'm thinking about that. You know me, I love to dig into the culture of the Bible. And I just imagine standing there at the foot of the cross. And maybe the guy who said this very soldier, maybe he was part of the team that was whipping him, mocking him as he carried his cross, driving the nails into his hands and feet, maybe putting the spear in his side, mocking him while he hung there. But yet at the end, it was undeniable. After everything that Jesus had done, after everything he had gone through, even when he cried out from the cross, "Father, forgive them," not "get them back." Not "Daddy, send the angels." No, "Father, forgive them." And that moved him. And if a centurion's life can be changed, if our guest's life can be changed, if our lives can be changed, your life can be changed. So know that today can be the day of salvation. Accept him today, and we'll see you in eternity. Amen?
Amen.
God bless you. Have a great Easter weekend.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a supporter-funded nonprofit organization and member of the Canadian Centre for Christian Charities. Thanks to faithful people like you, we are able to continue producing 100 Huntley Street. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R4M2, or visit crossroads.ca to learn more about our programs.
What if your favorite hymns held stories you've never heard? In The Origin of Hymns, It Is Well With My Soul, pastor and author Robert J. Morgan takes you into the powerful, untold moments behind the world's most beloved hymns.
For generations, these timeless hymns have lifted hearts and voices. That's why I'm excited to partner with 100 Huntley Street and Crossroads this month to thank you for your continued support of this life-giving ministry. When you understand the story behind a hymn, it changes how you sing it. It becomes personal, a whole new kind of worship. These songs didn't come from comfort. They were born out of real life, out of grief, struggle, and a deep, unshakable faith in God.
With a gift of $50 or more, or when you become a new monthly partner, request your copy. Call 1-800-265-3100 or visit crossroads.ca/hymns.